There is a great irony in this story. In presenting their case to Emory, the Anti-Defamation League intentionally avoided focusing on the subjective stories of the individual students. They developed their case and based their charges of discrimination and anti-Semitism on statistics alone. They correctly assumed that the 65% failure rate of the Jewish students would be their best proof. It worked. Under heat and pressure, Buehler conveniently resigned, and Emory was off the hook. Unfortunately, Emory chose to publicly deny the charges, and the Jewish community leaders chose to remain silent, fearing a nasty backlash. The silence did not diminish the backlash. The public had only the newspapers to inform their opinion. There were many letters and articles attacking the Jews. Why don't they work harder? Why don't they quit whining? It was a case of unintended consequences. Lost in the statistics and forgotten in history were the individual victims and the pain and suffering they experienced. No one sought them out, certainly not Emory, but neither did anyone else reach out with help, understanding, or consolation. I hope that I, in some small measure, have given them a voice and identity. I want the statistics to be enhanced by the voices of the people who were there.
I'm Perry Brickman, and I'm pleased and honored to be here in Jacksonville, Florida on August the 17th, 2010, guests of Ollie and Art Burns. We were classmates together at Emory University in 1949. We went to school for 2 years and were accepted to dental school. I only lasted a year. You were there for another year, and in 1953 you were invited not to come back. Later, we were very fortunate to be able to get accepted to other dental schools. I'm proud to say that I'm a 1956 graduate of the University of Tennessee. Art later was accepted to Temple University and finished in 1959, correct?
Correct.
Did you have any clue that you were not going to make it?
I do not seem to remember ever an instructor calling me in and saying, "This is your status before year end." I did not know that I was dismissed from the school until I received the letter from Dr. Buehler, from the dean. Taking the letter up to my mother in particular, that was an extremely difficult time because you have nothing to back you up. You have absolutely nothing but a letter. I volunteered for the draft, and I was interviewed and said, "We're going to send you to basic training. You're going to Camp Pickett, Virginia, which you will have your 8 weeks of basic infantry training, but then you will have 8 weeks of medic training. You will be in the medical corps." And Camp Pickett, Virginia, I can tell you, bivouacking, marching in 8 degrees, and camping out and hear grown men crying at night in their tents was still a little easier than Emory Dental School. Now what are you going to do? And in my mind, I want to go to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, and I want to attend the dental lab school. And I am called in for an interview, and my interviewer looks at me and he says, "Somehow we know each other." And he was an AE-Pi at Emory. We talked a little bit about Emory, and he says, "You're going to dental lab school in Fort Sam Houston, Texas." I was there, it was 16 weeks. Where will you now be assigned, and what dental lab? Will you be sent to Germany? Will you be sent to Korea? Where do we have a dental lab? He said, "Well, there's one in Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina." I said, "I would like to be stationed there." He says, "Soldier, you've got it." And that's where my permanent station would be, to do my dental lab work. The chief of my dental lab was Colonel Harold Massey. The man was great to me. Told him my story at Emory. There may have been 12 of us or so in the lab. We were in the back room behind the Fort Jackson Dental Clinic. Colonel Massey says, "Guess what? We're getting inspected by one of the inspector generals, and he happens to be your former dean, John Buehler, and he's going to be one of the inspectors." And the door to the clinic where they emerged from was right to my left. And I hear the door open. A very officious-looking person comes to me, and he looks at me and he says, "Burns, I would recognize that nose anywhere." And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry or drop my instruments. And I don't remember an answer. And as an enlisted man, Being addressed as such by a brigadier general, I decided not to comment with respect to being scared and, of course, to Colonel Massey. But that was an interesting event in my life, which I would have hoped would have been recorded for posterity. But I will tell you, that event happened. And now I want to go to dental school. Who is going to take trash from Emory, who has F's in all his crown and bridge, an F in operative dentistry, and an F here? My uncle, who was an orthodontist, got me an interview at Tufts Dental School in Boston. He and I flew to Boston. They said, we will not consider you as an applicant. Another consideration was Temple Dental School in Philadelphia. My father and I flew up there with my technique work. It was Dr. Lewis Herman who was on the admissions committee. He listened to my story. I handed him the technique work. I will never forget his words. He says, I don't think my seniors can do lab work as good as you're demonstrating. Well, to make a long story short, Dr. Herman says, I'm going to have to go to our dean, Dr. Gerald Timmons, who was Dr. Bueller's dean too here. He said, I remember when Dr. Bueller left here to become dean of Emory Dental School, and I will have to take this to the dean to see whether we can consider you, and I certainly will give it my best try. And praise the Lord, I was accepted to the dental school in the class of 59.
Tell us about the awards that were presented to you at graduation time.
One is OKU, the equivalent of making Phi Beta Kappa, I guess, in undergraduate school. The next award is the highest scholastic average for 4 years, which includes all your digital skills and your academic work, and that's called the Alpha Omega Award. The most prestigious award, of course, and for me that meant the most, was the Faculty Award for the highest proficiency in dentistry for your digital skills, because they told me that it's rare that they give the same award for the highest academic and for your hands to the same person. That was a pretty good day for me, to say my least, and finally I was absolved, is that the word, in front of my parents. Burns, who was 72nd in the class and turned out to be first out of 131. And then there was the Florida boards. I decided to, in my application, to tell them that I had been to Emory Dental School. And as far as advice, I decided to go to my dean, to Gerald Timmons. And so I went to his office, and he proceeded to call his secretary, and he dictated a letter. And he indeed wrote that he had talked to Dr. Bueller about me while I was there, and that the reason he thought that they let me go from Emory because I wasn't doing my own work. He was good enough to say that Burns was one of the finest dental students he ever had, and they made a mistake at Emory.
My first year was 1953. At the end of that year, and we went through horrible things during the year. There was a lot of war stories during the year. Bucky Bloom was in the class. At the end of the year, I get called into Bueller's office, and he said, Goldstein, he says, I flunked 19 in your class. And he says, you're the 20th. And he says, I can either flunk you or pass you. He says, what do you think I ought to do? I said, Dr. Bueller, it's up to you. And Bueller says to me, he says, why do you Jews want to go into dentistry? You don't have it in the hands. He says, why do you want to be a dentist? He says, you don't have it in the hands. And that was his opinion, that we were defective, that Jewish people were defective in skills in the hands. That was it. I mean, that told me exactly that not only was he anti-Semitic, because he felt like that we were inferior people. And he says, well, he says, I'm going to pass you for one reason. I said, what's that? He said, because I don't want your father and your uncle on my back. He says, they're already a nuisance. So it was going on in 53. Now that should be documented because the work was going on then. Remember, he was at Temple before he came to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And at Temple, he had a reputation of being anti-Semitic.
How do you know that?
Because some of the people at Temple told me that there were instances up there at Temple where anti-Semitic instances, and of course I would tell Dad, At one time, Bucky was flunking, and I got a B on my, which was like an A, because they wouldn't give me A's. But I got a B on my lab work on the model. They checked my row first, and I handed it over to Bucky. I said, put that in there. And I had gotten a B, and they flunked him. They flunked him on that quiz. In other words, there had to be prejudice because I got a B, which should have been an A, and the same thing that got graded a B got a flunking grade. They were out to flunk him. And that's what went on.
So what do you have against Bucky?
Look, I don't think he had anything except he was Jewish. Bucky is a terrific guy. Bucky did A work, but I mean, he did passable work.
So when you walked in there, when he called you in there and he said you were 20, did you have a clue?
No. Well, we knew one thing. Some of us broke into Bear Brown's office. He was full denture. And we saw his reports. And he was flunking of the Jewish students. Bear Brown. And we made copies. We saw the grades. His son had died in the World War. And he blamed the Jews on it.
Yeah, otherwise there wouldn't have been a war if it hadn't.
That's right. So he wanted to flunk as many Jews as possible. He wasn't the only one on the faculty at that point that was anti-Semitic.
Did you ever have any uncomfortable situations as a student with any of the instructors?
Yes. Freshman year I did. Dr. Jones, whose nickname was Bulldog Jones. I'll never forget the first time he took our section into the room to grade our first tooth carvings in dental anatomy. And when he got to mine, he looked at it, he says, this is Triff's, and really good, perfect, very complimentary, and awarded me a D. After saying nothing negative about it, said it's a D. And I really didn't know what that meant at the time. I just thought he was being a bit of an ass. But I didn't get the significance at that point. I was kind of naive. I think other students who started may have heard something about a problem at Emory. I had not, believe it or not, I had never heard of any problem at the dental school. So it was all new to me when I saw it and when I heard it. I once heard an instructor go up to the desk in the laboratory where the other instructors would take your work up to be checked, and I overheard him as I came walking up behind him. He was new, and I heard him say something to the effect of, "What about with the Jewish boys?" And that's all I heard of it, but I knew what he meant, and I had already become, from hearing other things from other people, I had already become uncomfortable with the situation there.
So even though you didn't understand the context, you weren't able to because that's all you heard.
I knew it wasn't flattering. And the general demeanor of some of the instructors, I felt was quite different toward me and other kids from my fraternity and other Jewish kids than it was with the non-Jewish kids.
What is the second thing that you remember?
That was the first. The other thing was from Dr. Bartholomew. You carved those ivorine teeth. You know, you spent hours and hours carving them. Then after you carved them, you mounted a quadrant from the central to the second molar. Well, I was just so proud of them. My girlfriend, I took it over to her house and showed it to her parents, and we had it, and you know, we had it wrapped, and you guarded it with your life. There was no military secret guarded more than all of us were guarding those teeth. I turned the teeth in. The next morning I go in, Dr. Bartholomew came out. It's black. He said, "I got some news." He said, "One of your teeth were missing." I said, "No, doctor, I know I turned them all." He said, "Are you calling me a liar?" I said, "No, Dr. Bartholomew, let me search around and I'll see it." I went to my desk and sat on that little stool, and I couldn't even speak, and I just couldn't believe it. I went home that night. I went over to her house and looked in the driveway, looked in the house. I looked through that AO house like it's never been looked through before. I knew it wasn't there. It was mounted, and placed in wax. It wasn't free teeth. It wasn't. About 10 o'clock that night, I knew I had it. I went in the little lab in the back and I started carving that bicuspid. About 4 o'clock in the morning, I finished polishing it, took it, went and took a shower, got ready for the boys to get up to go to breakfast. So I go to school the next day and I got that tooth in my hand like this, under my hand. And I walk up. As I'm walking up there, Dr. Bartholomew said, Black, I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't cause you any inconvenience. We found your tooth. I'm holding the other one in my hand. I said, oh, I'm so glad, Dr. Bartholomew. Thank you. And went and sat back down. Whew, that son of a bitch.
At the beginning of the junior year, you have to get requirements. At the beginning of the junior year, I had to get, I was in Clinic 2. I mean, it's disgusting that a university, even in those days, black people were treated in Clinic 2, which was downstairs in the basement. And some, you had to get some requirements, so you signed up for whatever it was that you were going to do. And so I did some work in Clinic 2. And right at the beginning, I had to get some material. And in order to get material, even if you were in Clinic 2, you had to go up to the main clinic floor. Maybe it was the 3rd floor. So you had to run up, you could take the elevator, it was quicker to run up and down the stairs. So the first time I went up the stairs and I went to check out some things, and this woman is standing behind the counter, and she looks at me and she says, Arnold, what are you doing in Clinic 2? She says, that's for the Jewish boys. I said, whatever her name was, I said, I'm one of the Jewish boys. And she didn't know what to say. But that was it. What are you doing in Clinic 2? And anyhow, I got the stuff, and she didn't know where to go and hide, because you weren't supposed to come out and say these things. And I went downstairs, did whatever I had to do. The next time I went back up to check stuff out at the window, one of the other ones came up, and she said, whatever her name was, she said she didn't really mean anything by that. Right, I know that.
Yeah.
But have you heard a story like that?
Do you remember any of the instructors, or did you see anything going on at that time?
Yes, I recognized right away that Dr. Bartholomew, the head of the operative dentistry and the overseer of the lab, was a hidden Nazi. And after I learned more, I felt like I had a yellow star on like they did in Europe. And I tried to stay out of his way.
Any others?
There was one other. Aschendorf and Bartholomew were Nazis.
Yeah.
Acted like Nazis, thought they were still in Germany and could subjugate the Jews. That was their attitude.
But you did your best to keep out
Avoid
of their
them.
way. Yeah, avoid them.
One day, Dr. Bartholomew, came through the door cursing me, called me a damn Jew, and I got up and I was going after him. And 3 of my friends tackled me and laid on me, and Bartholomew turned around and left. My wife and I, in our trust, are leaving 1/4 of our state to the University of Florida.
How much is Emory getting?
Zip.
So Chico and Greenberg were out. What kind of reverberations were felt from that?
Everybody was devastated and upset and frightened.
Scared.
I mean,
Really scared.
we were kids. And there was nobody to turn to. There was only one Jewish teacher in the school, and he was Bueller's Jew. He was Bueller's good buddy. And the Alpha Omegans were furious with him because he did absolutely nothing and never lifted a finger to help the Jewish boys in school. And I could never forgive him because we were kids thrown into a situation where, as you experienced, if you're going to be, you've already gone through 2 years of college or more, you've already gone through 2 or 3 years of dental school, and all of a sudden they're going to cut you loose, and what do you have left? You have nothing to turn to. It's a very, very frightening situation. I mean, Helen used to tell me I was grinding my teeth like crazy, keeping her awake at night. I was so nervous that when I finally did graduate, I stopped grinding my teeth. I was absolutely a nervous wreck.
About a month before graduation, with no advanced knowledge or anything, someone told me that I was wanted in the dean's office. So I went up, knocked on the door, walked in, the dean was behind his desk, and I look around, and the Supreme Court's there, the head of every department of the school. And I was on my feet for about a little over an hour. And
Doing what?
They went one by one.
Oh.
From operative to prosthetics, oral surgery, everything.
What?
Telling me what a lousy student I was. I should have never gotten out of the first year. That there's no way I'm going to graduate. And this went on all around the room.
Was Bueller sort of... no.
He
was the head guy.
He was the head guy.
He would just introduce
each one. Mm-hmm. And when that was over, I mean, I was ready to faint. I walked out, and Black Bart was out about 2 minutes later. And I'll never forget this. I was ready to cry. In fact, my eyes are tearing now. He put his arm on my shoulders. He said, "Jay, you know you're one of my best students, but I have a wife and 2 kids, and I have to play on this team." And so then I understood really where it was coming from. And I just had to wait. 2 weeks later, I got the letter saying that I was graduating.
Before you left, he told you what now?
Not to count on graduating.
And not to send out your...
invitations to anybody to attend graduation.
So not to send any invitations out.
Yep. So I did nothing but walk around in a trance for the next 2 weeks till I got the letter from the university stating that I completed everything I was going to graduate.
Medical school was entirely different. They were there to help you get through, okay? They were there to educate you, okay? And I did very well. Heck, I was an Alpha Omega Alpha, which is, you know what AOA is.
It's what Phi Beta Kappa is.
It's the Phi Beta Kappa medical school. Yeah. I graduated high in my class. Following that, I interned in Chicago at Cook County Hospital. And interestingly enough, of course, I didn't get through dental school because I didn't have good hands. But nonetheless, I was offered a surgical residency at Cook County Hospital because apparently my rotation through surgery showed my hands were pretty good in operating on the human body. I don't want an individual apology. No. Listen, my life has been quite successful, okay? But they owe the Jewish community and the Jewish kids who suffered that indignation, okay, a global apology. Hey, we were wrong. We turned our backs. We didn't look what was going on. We should have been more proactive at the time. We apologize for what scars we might have left on you. And believe me, it's left a scar on me. I'll be the first to admit it. You know, I was a, quote, a failure. Now, I really wasn't a failure, okay? They were failures.
But you were...
But I was the brunt of their failure, and somehow or another, that gets ingrained into you. And it's troubling. And globally,
all of the students at Emory Dental School deserve an apology.